So again, officially welcome to the Diversity Action Team Community Program for February. It is entitled Silence Speaks, Making Space for Critical Youth and Adult Conversations Around Racial Equity and Social Justice. You will see the flow of the program down the right-hand side. Those of you who are here often, this shouldn't look like any surprise. And if you're new, welcome. We're glad to have you here. And if you're watching the video, you know exactly how long it takes before maybe you want to pause it and do something else for a little bit and come back, which is always nice if you're watching the video. So I apologize that that quote is a little bit blurry, but I just want to say a couple of words before we get started about the title of the program. When Holly and I selected it, Holly is my colleague who worked on this from Social Justice Edgerton. She's waving her hand. She's going to be manning the chat for us tonight as well. We wrote the title and we entitled it Silence Speaks. And then when we started speaking with the youth, that title brought on an even greater meaning. And so I just would like to put it into the space of the program to think a little bit about what silence really can mean, because it was apparent that the youth who we spoke with had a lot of intentional reasons as to why they may have been silent. And some of those had to do with vocabulary gaps. Some of those had to do with the power differential they knew in the room when they were speaking with adults. Some of it was lack of confidence because they haven't had the opportunity to practice difficult conversations. And some of it was because they were very aware of the cultural views of the adults they were with, whether or not they shared the same identity as those adults or not. So the idea of silence and what it actually means is absolutely something to keep in mind as we go. So first and foremost, thank you to all of our partners, Hedberg Public Library, YWCA Rock County, Beloit NAACP Branch 3251, UW-Madison Division of Extension Rock County, Social Justice Edgerton, and the Janesville League of Women Voters. And I would also like to say a special thank you because this program came to be because of many, many, many other voices that Holly and I interacted with. And so we thank all of the youth who took their time to edit questions and to share particular stories. We thank all the adults who clicked on an email, who shared a Padlet, who encouraged somebody to share their story. There was a lot going on over the past few months to complete this program. And Holly and I are just very grateful for all of those who have helped along the way. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement statement that was written by the Diversity Action Team Allies of Native Nations. We would like to recognize that we are meeting on the ancestral lands of Native nations. In Wisconsin, there are 11 federally recognized Native American sovereign nations and one seeking to regain federal recognition. We acknowledge these Indigenous communities who have stewarded this land through the generations and pay respect to their elders, past and present. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This is a Zoom presentation. The glorious virtual world help us take care of the space for our presenters. Remember that for questions, there will be a time for Q&A after the official panel portion. So please write your questions down on a piece of paper for later, or please use the chat as much as you would like. Holly will be manning the chat for us this evening. And if there's any kind of sensitive question, you're more than welcome to send a private message to Holly regarding that question so that she can share it in the appropriate time. Please stay muted. We have several panelists and we'll be going back and forth between them. So it does become difficult if you are unmuted. If you become unmuted, it's likely someone from the team will mute you just to make sure that everybody can continue to hear as best as possible. And number 3, I already hit on. So again, thank you for being in this space with us tonight. A couple of other pieces, just remember this is being recorded. We all clicked onto that a few minutes ago. If you have concerns or needs during this program, I'm the program's champion. My name is Erin, and I work in positive youth development for Division of Extension in Rock County. Zoom functions can sometimes be confusing. We had a little taste of that at the beginning with pinning the speaker view. Amy is willing to try out being a troubleshooting contact for basic things. However, we're not, manning the grand IT team behind us for major issues. These would be very, very simple audio visual issues, but hopefully everything will go smoothly for all of you. Remember, if you're in your home, try to find a nice quiet place, a relaxing place. Take care of yourself when you need it. However, if your video is on or your audio is on, you've invited us into your home, so please be aware of that. Now it's fun get to actually start doing the fun part, and that is introducing who will be in the space with us tonight. So Julie Boynton will be our moderator. Julie Boynton is a member of Social Justice Edgerton in the role of community educator. She is passionate about equipping people to engage in courageous conversations about race and racism. She co-leads groups that examine whiteness and the history of race in our country. She has a BA in psychology and worked for years in behavioral health, and she lives in Wisconsin. I will do a brief run through of the panelists, and then our first question really allows them to introduce themselves to you, which is why I don't have bios for them here. So our panelists are Stephanie Gates, a youth advocate from the School District of Janesville, Derek Ninmer, an Edgerton School Board member and EMT, and Benelli Ganj, a junior at Beloit College. So here we go. I'm going to give a, I apologize for that. I'm going to give a brief overview of the project, and then Julie will be taking it over from there. All of the panelists will have several minutes to give their first response, and then we'll have some conversation time between them available before moving on to the next question. And Julie will just let us know when she's ready. So again, the idea of centering youth voice was something that was very important to Holly and I when we started this program. The content of the session was developed through intentional conversations, surveys, other ways to engage with youth and adults in Rock County. Youth were leaders to revise the questions, and we've been gathering voices for the last several months in a variety of ways, even song selections, which I could have a few I could share with you at the end if people are interested. I would like to remind everyone that this is not an extensive research project. That was not the point. The point was to center youth voice in the space. Many of the conversations on challenging topics have been had about youth without youth's opinion being heard in the space. And Holly and I wanted to center that. However, we wanted to ensure a safe space for the youth who shared that, which is why we don't have youth panelists, but we have used their voice to create the questions for our panelists, and we have extra pieces that we can share with you at different times. So we're very excited to have our panelists in the room for some great strategies and to share some really important experiences they've had. From here, Julie, it's all yours. And you can just let me know each time you want me to advance the slide.
Thank you so much, Erin. Welcome, everyone. I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. I will give you a brief warning. I do have 3 dogs in the background. I thought they were okay. They seem to be as excited about the program as I am. So they may be giving some encouragement from their background, and I apologize for that. But let's get going with the panelists. So I'd like to ask Stephanie if you could get us started by telling us about yourself and your experience working with youth. And why did you say yes to being on this panel?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Stephanie Gates. As she mentioned, I am a youth advocate for the School District of Janesville. I've been working as a youth advocate for 7 years, all at the high school level. I also work with a female group, it's called SIS, Sisters Inspiring Sisters. And so it's a safe space and an opportunity for female students to get together in a safe space and discuss issues that very important to them. And I also work on several committees in the district and in the buildings. And I just felt like I said yes because I'm always interested in hearing information and gaining knowledge from other people. So anything I can obtain to help the youth I work with, I'm already always interested in. And also, by the same token, I'm hoping that I'm able to share something that will likewise help the youth that you work with.
Thank you, Stephanie. Derek, would you like to follow Stephanie and share a little bit about yourself and your experience working with youth? And also, why did you say yes to this panel opportunity?
Hi, Derek Ninmer, he, him, and I appreciate giving the land acknowledgement at the beginning. I have been in public safety for 3 decades. Last 20 years, I've been working at the 911 Communications Center here in Rock County. I serve as the public outreach coordinator, so I've had opportunities to reach out to youth throughout the county in relationship to my role as public safety personnel. And also, I've been on the school board in Edgerton here for the last decade or so. And the title of this event tonight, Silence Speaks, and I think that strikes me, is that a lot of times it's easier to be silent, and now's not the time to be silent. We need to speak about these issues, and if not me, who else will? The reason I'm here is because someone that I greatly admire and respect asked me to be here. And if that's, the least I can do is show up to listen and speak my truth as well. So thank you for inviting me this evening.
Thank you, Derek. Benelli, you're up. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experiences and why you decided to say yes to this opportunity?
Absolutely. So hi again, everyone. I'm Nellie. I'm a junior at Beloit College. So my experience with youth, so I myself am this interesting mix of youth and adult, just because of my age. And I have collaborated, obviously, with other youth and adults inside and outside of school and in professional settings, such as internships. One of the reasons that I agreed to this panel was just because I've had really meaningful conversations with Erin. I've gotten to know her over the summer about racial justice and equity work, and the program description was right up my alley, and I really liked that. And final note, I constantly have to navigate uncomfortable conversations, as it said so in the description, as a person of color. So, kind of like what other people said, I think it's really great to have this opportunity to share what I know and hear from others.
Thanks, Benelli. Yeah, I like the way you described yourself. You're at this interesting area of youth and young adult, and your perspective will be very, very appreciated tonight. So thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone. And Erin, I think we can go to the next slide. So I wish there was more space in school to talk about things that were happening or impacting us. There are major events happening in the world, but in school, it feels like we live in a bubble. And that's from an Edgerton High School student. So for our panelists, our question is, what do you think youth need to know? And then what are the factors that you take into consideration as you decide that? Derek, could you get us started?
Yeah, I think that's true. We do live in a bubble. And especially for the kids, we create this environment based on what we think is best for them. And a lot of times we're missing perspective. And then when the student is making a statement like that, they are often more aware than the adults are. So the youth need to know that it's okay to speak your truth. It's okay to ask the questions, and to understand that you're going to get pushback. There's this tendency in society to just kind of get along, and it's up to individuals to join together and make their groups, make their voice heard, and it's okay to speak your truth and to share your ideas with others. To take into consideration, you will get pushback and you may get in trouble, but sometimes trouble is good trouble. So that's what I'd have to say about that.
Thank you, Derek. And I love the nod to John Lewis. Benini, so what do you think youth need to know? What are you taking into consideration as you make that decision?
Yeah, so once again, as a young person myself, I know it can be very uncomfortable to bring up these issues about race and racism, also accounting for being a person of color. But I think youth need to know, kind of similar to what Derek said, um, from my personal background, I can guarantee you, saying this to youth, you're not the only one thinking or experiencing these things that are hard to experience, even if it feels like you're alone, which is totally valid. And I can definitely say that's probably a common feeling. But I would say for youth, at least for me, I look to find other Black people, other Indigenous people, other people of color, whether that be in my friend group or like a trusted network, peers, and gradually work up to having conversations about this stuff with your white friends. And this can take place in class, during lunch, walking to class, wherever really. But, some of the things that you have to take into consideration, do you feel empowered to speak up? Do you feel safe enough to speak up? Whether that be to an adult or other youth. And my other thing that I'll add on to that is I don't necessarily think it's Black people, Indigenous people, people of colors, youth's responsibility to call out or make people aware of racial injustices just because we experience these things, right? I think white people need to hold each other accountable. So that includes like your white friends, your white teachers, your white faculty, whatever. But also, it's important to work with each other within that community of Black people, Indigenous people, people of color.
Thank you, Benini. Yeah, several really great points. Stephanie?
Yes, I also second what Benini just said as it relates to the student needs to know that the student is not alone and that the student's feelings are valid. And so the students need to seek out an adult who they feel comfortable talking with and discussing some of these feelings with. Take in consideration who you have as an ally in your building, and what are your needs. Know what those are and be willing to share those. Also, your resources. There are people in the community. There's other students and groups you can join to kind of discuss what you need, but also be willing to take some action in all of this. There comes a time when you kind of have to walk that talk, get involved in things where you are able to make yourself known in the schools, join clubs and participate in assemblies, and any opportunity you have to make an impact on the school, whether it's artwork or images, and participating in programs that are not just only cultural related, but general populations, include yourself. So I'm just excited that, we have like the stakeholders committee in our district where it allows students to come together at a district level and kind of talk to our community counterparts and some staff and administrators and that kind of thing to voice your opinions and what you're feeling and some of the things that you need. And in that, sometimes students get to assist with the plans for professional development. So so have a safe space to talk about some of these things, but just make sure that what we're doing is actionable and we're able to impact students in some way. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. We're doing great with time. Do any of the other panelists want to respond to what was shared from your co-panelists or just add on to your original thoughts?
Julie,
If
I would
I-
like to interrupt just really quickly. I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure that we're pronouncing one of our panelists correctly. Can you help us out? It's
Yeah. Benelli.
It's Derek.
Benelli, yes. And Derek, yes. Thank you, Derek. And
Benelli.
Stephanie.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
if I-
Holly. Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
wanted to tag along on Benelli's comments. I think that's very strong, that leading to other people. And then, I'm in a smaller community here. We're mostly white, to be fair, but it is incumbent upon us to take on the work as well. It's not just on the people of color. And I would also suggest that there is strength in numbers. And so she mentioned the whole BIPOC, if instead of segregating every single part, if the more people that can come together, the more effective that your actions are. And I shouldn't say your actions, our actions are as allies and also members of the marginalized communities.
Stephanie or Benelli, would you like to respond?
First of all, Benelli, if I was pronouncing your name incorrectly, I apologize for that. Talking to each other is hugely important, and making sure that when we are talking to each other, we are talking to understand and to take that talk to make a difference. I know sometimes I want to echo what someone said as it relates to, it's not just about people of color talking to people of color, but it's also white people talking to white people, and then black people talking to people of other races and to white people. So, but we have to do this in a place of understanding and not in a defensive stance. If I share my experience with you, please try to receive that experience and gain more information and more knowledge from it. And so if we both keep open minds and have an open discussion, I think it'll carry the work of what we're trying to do, in essence, have our students be successful, in the community, it's successful in the classroom. And therefore, this big world that we live in will be prepared when we come out of this bubble that we are in right now.
Stephanie, thank you. And I feel like I'm hearing you say for one way the students can feel less alone is for us to make sure we are listening to them. And especially when we are sharing from our own experiences, or a person of color sharing from their experience, it is so crucial that we just stop and take it in and listen.
Absolutely.
Am I getting that right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Erin, I think we are ready to move on to the next slide.
I would like to acknowledge just really quick, as somebody who's monitoring the chat, Adolfo, I will be sure to write that question down. It's a good one. It's about how administrators and teachers make these conversations possible. So I've got that one logged for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. So we'd like to ask you to tell us about a conversation when you learned something from youth, when you had a courageous conversation with them. Benelli, I feel like I am still saying your name wrong, and I apologize. I would like for you to lead us off, and could you say your name one more time?
Yeah, so you're actually pronouncing it right. It's Benelli, so you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. This is a really interesting question. I mean that in the best way possible because, again, like where I'm at, like I'm constantly having these courageous conversations, whether I choose to engage in those or not. So it kind of goes back to me like navigating, right? Like navigating these courageous conversations I guess I don't really know if I can think of a specific because there's just so many that I've had. Um, but I will say that actually, like what Stephanie was saying just a little bit ago, it's really about the listening part, right? And regardless of your identity, she was talking about uh, like a black person talking to another black person or a black person talking to a person of color, right? Um, and it doesn't have to be just those examples, but being aware of your social standing and your identities when you go into these conversations. How are you going to go into these conversations? What's what are you trying to get out of these conversations? And one of those ways could be gauging this relationship with that person that you want to have this conversation with, right? And I'm not saying like you should avoid having conversations with strangers or people that you work with, but it is kind of an important thing to gauge whether or not you're close enough to this person. And others might think differently, but just from my experience, it gets back to like being comfortable having these conversations. And this is gonna look different, adult to youth versus me going into conversations with other youth, other adults. But really, for anyone, just be really aware of your identity and how you're going to go into a conversation if you so choose to.
Thank you, Benelli. Yeah, that's a great point. We all have a cultural identity, and the more that we're aware of what that means, I think helps us to be aware of our expectations when we enter into a conversation. Thank you for sharing that. Derek, can you tell us about a conversation when you learned something from youth or had a courageous conversation with them?
Yeah, and I guess that's probably part of the reason why I'm here is that I'm hearing the like a sense of hopelessness or that nothing that kids are wanting, that nothing happens. There's no way to move forward on these issues or find consensus, and that's kind of why I'm just I'm not the expert on any of this stuff, and I've had the privilege of attending a few things with Mark Perry through my employment, and I come from the background of college educated, and I idealistically thinking I'm living in a post racist world, and fortunately I'm learning that that's not true. I can't continue to live in this bubble, and these kids know more than I do, and they don't feel like they have an avenue for doing it. So I'm trying to lead by example, maybe a little bit, to just get out here and encourage kids if they need someone to talk to, if they need someone to stand behind them, that we have to keep trying, we have to keep moving forward. And hopefully we'll be able to do that. And another thing that I've experienced is that the more I know, the more I learn, the less that I know that I know. So I think the point about listening is important to understand where people are coming from. And if you don't know where they're coming from, it's fair to not know, but it doesn't excuse you from not knowing.
Thank you, Derek. And I appreciate what you shared about your own learning experience. Just brings to mind that we all have blind spots and aren't always aware of what we do not know. So committing to education and not staying in that bubble that you talked about is so crucial for healthy relationships and healthy community. Stephanie, would you share with us a conversation in which you learned something from youth or had a courageous conversation with them?
Okay. Well, I guess I want to start with like, how do we hear students or youth, I should say, when they have a difficult time expressing what they feel or what they are experiencing? And so it's the greatest opportunity to really ask general and then drill down questions to make sure we're not leading what they are trying to express, but we are hearing what they are saying, and we're trying to gain a better understanding so we can validate their feelings and pour guidance in some way into them. One of the biggest things I'm noticing is that students don't like, or youth do not like to feel singled out. If there's a question, or don't just expect for me, if it's related to a cultural issue, don't expect for me to be the one to be that expert for that culture, because although I may be a part of it, I am an individual. We are not, all the same. And so I'm finding that weight is put on a lot of youth, and it's not a comfortable position for them. So when they try to express or they don't participate, don't take that as if the student is being disengaged or defiant in some way. It's just that they just don't have the capacity to carry it anymore. And so just have that conversation. I just try to give students tools on, becoming an advocate for yourself. If at that moment you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of the classroom or the group, then talk later after, the bell sounds, or send an email. Come to me, and we can talk together, allies, that kind of thing. But it is just hugely important to hear some of these courageous conversations or the feelings that these students are having. And when they cannot exactly express what they are feeling and what they want to say, it's up to us to try to help pull that out of them and make sure we have a clear understanding of it.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I really appreciate that reminder that asking anyone, but particularly youth, to represent whatever group they're a part of is keeping that burden on their shoulders, and too much and unfair. And that's a great thing for us to keep in check, that we don't ask one person to represent a larger group of people. Stephanie, you mentioned your talks. Where do you give your talks?
When you say, well, a couple ways. I speak with my youth individually. I have office space and we talk individually. Also, I've mentioned that I have a female group, Sisters Inspiring Sisters, and we meet monthly, and we have sometimes speakers come in. We do different activities. And so sometimes it's just the group themselves. We just pull different questions out of a box or something. Or if there's something that's going on that has impacted the youth in some way, whether it's national or something that happened in the school, we give them the opportunity to express that. And also by being on the stakeholders committee and some of the different other create team committees and that in the school buildings, I'm able to have conversations in those platforms also.
Great, thank you. Thank you for providing all of that extra information for us. Erin, I think we're ready to move on to the next slide. I feel like sometimes they avoid telling us things to protect us, which in the end only makes us feel like they don't trust us. And that's from a Beloit high school student. So what strategies do you use to have these courageous conversations? And what makes these strategies productive? I think a few of you have already touched on this a little bit, but if we want to go a bit deeper and explore maybe more specific things. Derek, would you like to get us started?
Sure. I guess to go along with it, is that listening is the most important thing, but sometimes I feel like I have to talk a little bit to kind of get kids to open up by sharing my reality, by explaining that it is hard. It's hard to address these things. It's hard to stand up and speak publicly about things, even if you know that they're crucial and they're right. So by sharing my nervousness or anxiousness about speaking publicly, sharing thoughts that I have, acknowledging my lack of understanding, but my desire to learn, that can then help kids feel more comfortable in sharing their concerns and standing up for what they know is right.
Thank you, Derek. You're giving me the image of kind of the adult peeling back the layers of an onion and being willing, to expose themselves and to be vulnerable. We're asking them to be vulnerable. So to kind of build a bridge by doing the same thing. Thank you. Benelli, what strategies do you use to have courageous conversations, and what makes them productive? What comes to mind?
Yeah, so kind of going back to some things that I said earlier, I think one of the biggest things for me is I try to think about my relationship to this person, right? Like, how well do I know this person? Is it someone that I just have a class with? Is it someone that I know personally? Is it someone that I just pass by, right? And obviously, this is going to look different depending on, being older adults, right? Working with youth, that's going to look different. But definitely looking at the relationship that I have with such people, but also I would say, sorry, I like had this all formed in my head and now I'm rethinking what I was thinking.
You're fine. Take your time. We're doing great on time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you move on to Stephanie?
You want me to come back to you?
Yeah,
Let me
I'm
move
so
on.
sorry. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely fine. I
Julie.
should have said that.
Oh,
Holly?
sorry, Julie. No, I did bypass a prompt. Somebody, Santo had asked if Benelli had any thoughts after what Miss Gates was talking about, what Stephanie was talking about, the places that she's had these conversations. I didn't know if Benelli would be willing to sort of give her thoughts as the youth, where those conversations had happened, where they were the most productive.
Yeah, I can definitely respond to that, and maybe that'll help me think about what I was gonna say. Yeah, so yeah, I really did connect with what Stephanie said earlier, and spaces I've had these conversations. A lot of it has happened in class. A lot of it has happened privately. And that just really depends on what we're talking about, right? And again, I know I keep saying this, but who I'm talking to, while being mindful of how I show up in the world or how I am showing up for these people or this person. And another thing that I want to reiterate what Stephanie said too is that especially with BIPOC youth, there's already all these emotional burdens, right? So you need to find this balance and be careful of asking them to have conversations that they might not want to have, even though it seems like it would be a great conversation, because racial justice and equity, but that is something that you also need to gauge, right? Because just because someone brings something up in class that I might really resonate with does not mean I want to talk about it. And that can be for a number of reasons, right? Maybe the youth isn't comfortable with the people in the room. They don't want to be singled out, like Stephanie was saying. They don't want to have to represent a whole group because, again, yes, we are individuals, like Stephanie said. We all have our own identities too, along with being a part of communities. So I'm not sure how that exactly looks like. I'm still working on it. all of this is constant. This is not some like one and done deal. So yeah, it really depends. I don't know, like I don't know if I have a perfect answer for that, but you got to be mindful of how people are showing up, where they're showing up from. Don't force conversations. But I will say this is one of the biggest things, like let youth lead the way and you be there to support as an adult.
Mm. Well, you gave several really terrific strategies. So I appreciate what you've shared, and especially that last bullet, to let them lead. And picking from what you've shared, and also Stephanie and Derek, is helping them, creating a safe space so that they feel like they can lead. So important for setting the groundwork for having those courageous conversations. Derek, would you like to share strategies that you use?
I think I just did, but I can talk more.
Did you?
Yes, I think he did,
I'm
Julie.
sorry.
That's okay.
That's great. Okay, our Stephanie, would you like to share more about strategies?
Okay.
And if we've completed this one, we can move on. But I don't want to pass up the opportunity if you do have very specific things to share for what you know has worked in the past.
Okay. Well, if I'm working in a group setting, I set the tone of respect. We're going to respect whomever is speaking. And if you do not agree with what the speaker is saying, perfectly okay. Your comments are directed toward the conversation and not the person. So we would just want to make sure that everything stays respectful in that sense. Because we can definitely disagree without attack. I mean, we can, disagree without attack per se, right? And the other thing is, if I'm talking to you individually, then I'm going to make sure that I'm giving you my undivided attention. I want you to understand that there's no judgment here. I respect what you have to say. And as a matter of fact, I'm learning from you as well. So I'm very interested in what you have to say. And I don't want to try to control the direction of the conversation as if it leads to what I would like to project or say. It's about the youth being able to project and express what they need to say. So in that capacity, I just try to make sure things stay factual, and I also gauge the capacity of the individual. I may start off with a general question and I'll comment on certain things that they say and ask probing questions, that kind of thing, so they can hear themselves, they can challenge themselves. And also, I let them navigate, the topic. And the topic goes deeper. It's not a matter of trying to shelter. We shouldn't shelter, but we do have to make sure that the students or the youth are navigating the topics in a way that they can understand it, and it's not something that they are basing on what someone else has said to them, what their friends are feeling, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's peer, it's you. So that's kind of the strategies that I like the youth to understand, that you are your navigator in these topics.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, from all of you, the point that they need to be empowered and lead the conversation. I'm also hearing you say it's important for us to lay down our own agenda and let them steer the conversation wherever they feel safe taking it, and allowing them the space to do that. thank you for those strategies.
Thank you.
Would anyone on the panel like to add anything else before we move on from this slide?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I actually thought of what I was going to say earlier. Super.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I kind of already said what I was going to say anyways. But I think something that's worked really well for me when teachers do this is just like super simple, like when you're introducing the course or however you do it, where you work or are employed, just saying something like, you know, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, please do so. Whether that be for just today or in upcoming like class periods or anything that we talk about, please take care of yourself first. I think sometimes we can overlook that. I know myself can be like, well, yeah, they're supposed to say that, but it actually can be pretty helpful.
And Ellie, that's a great point. And keeping that in the forefront of our mind, I think offering that first is a great way to establish trust with who you're speaking of, letting them know that, you know, their well-being is the priority. So thank you for that strategy and suggestion as well. Okay, Erin, I think we are ready to move on.
Okay, so that brings us to the next step slides, which we will go through briefly because they highlight in many ways what the panelists have shared so far. We'll put all these links into the chat once I stop sharing my screen and we're in the open Q&A portion. So just a couple of things, since I don't feel like I need to read these out loud word for everyone. There's been some really great reminders that these slides highlight. So I mean, first of all, as we get back to this point again, I would like to reiterate the question of silence, right? And what we've heard as to why that may or may not be what's happening and why the youth would be silent at any particular moment. And that's a really important question to be considering, right? So again, we really just appreciate, I think, the universe helping us with the name of this program. And then the second piece being that we've heard over and over is just the importance of the supportive adult relationship and what that really looks like. And I would just like to, I think, extend this learning to a certain extent, because while these topics on diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important to me, or I wouldn't be in this program space, overall, the work with youth, they ask for these things no matter what the content is, right? So we could be talking about mental health. We could be talking about what they're going to do after college. And oftentimes the kinds of support they need remain the same. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. So if you're an adult, as we've heard, self-educate on different reasons why you would or would not be having the conversation. And I think also content yourself, because as Stephanie mentioned, sometimes you have to fact check, right? Practice listening, that was said over and over again. And then that idea of sharing power, right? Benelli said it very eloquently. You need to give them the space to lead. And then give them the tools to do so. For youth, if you're watching this, again, there's a lot of great opportunities in the community and a lot of good educational places that you can go. So always be looking for what the community is always working on. I did highlight the Excellence for All website here because they've been adding to those websites, but I know there are many others who are doing the same. And self-educating doesn't just mean content about some of these historical pieces or what's going on in the news. It can also mean policies. We had some very impactful experiences, even with the planning of this program, that showed us how important it is to understand what the policies are around these issues. And that's another piece that youth can always be learning a little bit more as well, right? So that they can advocate for themselves if they need to, or at least find someone who can help them or stand behind them. Try to find those safe spaces or those times when it's appropriate to act, and never be afraid to be you, as I think we've heard again and again. And as always, share your voice in whatever way makes sense for you. I've shared several different examples. I've seen some really great photography and art recently where youth have been talking about these topics. And again, even when we were doing the research for this, there were, excellent song lyrics shared with me and all these different pieces. So, youth can absolutely keep putting into the space the pieces that make most sense to them to be speaking around. So with that, we're going to enter into the open Q&A portion. We're more than willing and welcoming to have people unmute and ask their questions, either to the panel in general or to a specific panelist. If it gets unruly for whatever reason, though I don't anticipate it would, we can switch over to, calling on people specifically. And if you do have a question that seems sensitive to you, please don't hesitate to send it privately to Holly so she can ask it for you. And I'll put the resource links in the chat now.
Hey, Erin, would it be an appropriate time for me just to ask the question that Adolfo had earlier? Adolfo, is that okay with you?
All is open at this point.
So Adolfo had asked just what teachers and administrators' role is to bring up issues or make space for hard conversations to happen within the school. I think Derek can speak to the fact that nowadays we want our teachers to be neutral. I hear that word a lot, to not have an opinion one way or the other. But how do we get teachers and administrators to make the space? I would put that question to Derek.
Yeah, I'll start by saying sorry, but I think what you're saying is unfortunately probably true, and that's where we get to. We were talking about having conversations, encouraging conversations, understanding diversity and welcoming it in every way we possibly can, but then we try to affect these, create these spaces, and then there's this systemic problem. I don't think we've really talked about that yet this evening, is that, I'm racist because I am complicit in a system that doesn't really allow these things to occur. We want to pretend that everything's all right, and we're already, like I said earlier, about being post-racist and ideally don't see people of color when we're not there, and we have to figure out a way to provide safe spaces for youth and also for adults that want to provide the safe spaces, and we're not doing that. So I don't know that I really have an answer to that, but I think that is a very good point, that we need to be more open-minded, and we have to be more willing to accept our internal deficiencies and find a way to make these things happen. And I apologize, I don't know the answer, and I also apologize that your statement is true, Holly. But that, I think, comes through people becoming uncomfortable. Like, it's uncomfortable for me to be here now. It's uncomfortable for me to say these things, but they're true, and they need to be said. And then the hope is that kids, my kids, your kids, will hear this, that their parents will hear this, other adults in the community will hear this, and they will gain courage from watching others stand up, Holly, and take their lead and follow, because they know it's the right thing to do. And through joining together to create a better environment, that's how we do it. Specifically how we do it, I don't know, but I think if we get some grown-ups together that are smarter than me, we can figure out a way to do this.
Well, then I have a question for Stephanie, and it links to maybe Derek's. And I don't mean to take over this conversation, but it was something I had down on my list. Stephanie, how long have you been employed with the school district of Janesville? And Derek, do you believe every school should have someone like Stephanie employed to be the conduit for these questions and for these kids and for the adults, and it's to all get along and get in a room and talk. Stephanie?
I've been employed with the district for 7 years. I'm in my 7th year right now. And I know my position has been in the, I'm not sure exactly how long, but I know it's been a few years before I came along. And I think it's, I've always said, whether I'm in this position or not, I just hope it's a position that does continue in the district. I think it is very beneficial. I think it's beneficial for the students, and I think it's beneficial to the staff and administrators as well. And also, I do feel like there's times in the schools where our administrators, they have listening sessions. They, if there's an issue that seems to, come up several times, or students or a group of students are pretty passionate about, they'll pull those students together and hear, what they need to say, what they have to say, and try to, add some insight, or hopefully, some in the past, whatever they can try to do to try to impact it. Is that enough? No, we need to always, do more and do more. Also, in the moment, if something were to happen in the moment in a classroom, don't ignore it, address it. That's the perfect time to do so. And the more we get of that, I know, someone mentioned being comfortable versus uncomfortable. There are times where it may not be comfortable, but it needs to be done. It needs to be discussed. So absolutely do that. And in our clubs and in our groups and that kind of thing too, we need to make sure that we're discussing some of these things, allow administrators or allow other group members in and talk to each other, that kind of thing too. Because if we don't, we need to start with conversation, but we always need to try to have some kind of action plan. We have to make an impact at some point.
Thank you. In the chat also, before I open it up to anybody who wants to speak, Santo and Jean just were wondering if you could tell a little bit more about CIS and stakeholders, just sort of at least why they're successful.
Who did you address that question to?
I believe it was for you, Stephanie.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you repeat it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So Jean and Santo asked that you could say more about what CIS and stakeholders is about.
Okay. We have CIS, and that's Sisters Inspiring Sisters. We also have BRO, that's Brothers Reaching Out. And now at Craig, we also have LULAC, and that's a group that includes our Latino students. So we try to have these spaces where students can address concerns that's unique to them. So in these groups, like for example, we are in Black History Month now. So our group, especially at Parker, we are leading a number of activities, educational activities. Some are just fun activities, just different things like that. But it's all to educate in the end, And so so we do things like that. We help and lead in putting on our MLK programs. We also try to put images around the school and the buildings. And Craig has also started a BSU club. So there are spaces where we're trying to hear the voices of our diverse students and appreciate the value and what they contribute to the schools and to the classrooms. And our stakeholders committee is a group of students who come together we have some now from the middle schools and the high schools. We have administrators, we have some community stakeholders, and that's when we come together. We meet generally downtown at the ESC. And we try to come up with something that we can do that will actually make an impact. Last year, everyone talked and it's decided that it was best to work with the fifth graders. So because we had to do it virtually, we did a discussion with three different elementary school fifth graders, and it's to prepare them for expectations into high school, to start preparing, understanding. So your pathway would be, the journey there would be a little easier once you arrive, So just different things like that. We've had retreats, and like I said earlier, I think we help plan the professional development, PDs, things like that. So there's a lot that we do, and I love that committee. I think it's good for the students, and I think it's good for the district. But again, we need to do more. We always need to go higher and higher in what we're doing.
Yes, very, very true. Thank you, Stephanie, for explaining some of those things. And in the chat, if you didn't know what BSU and LULAC was, I really appreciated Aaron and Amy giving us the lowdown on that. Thank you. Adolfo, you had a question. Would you like to unmute and ask it?
Oh, yes, I have a question. Stephanie was talking about all that amazing things that they are doing in Janesville, in Beloit. And I am wondering what of that activities we have here in Edgerton. She was talking about the training that the teachers have for when they have issues in the classroom. That is very common in here at the school. And I am wondering what kind of training or teachers have about that the race issues, or if they have any training about, okay, how to handle, because a situation that happened in my son's classroom, and the teacher's reaction was, oh, he didn't mean that, and move on. So I don't know if anybody can answer from the high school. And if we don't have anything, what we need to do in order to, or the teachers get some kind of training, or how we can participate to make that happen.
Well, yes, first you were correct. I am from the Janesville School District. And just kind of based on what you said with your son, part of the training, because our district, they set up just before school starts, they set up different trainings and professional developments and just different things for the staff in general. And so part of that is some equity training. And so, and one of the topics was impact. I forgot the other part of it. Well, let me just explain it, and maybe the other word will come to me. Well, you may, intent versus impact. So just like with your son, you may intended something a certain way, but how did it impact? How did it land? So that is a great topic that was part of the training. And it's about when a person explains to you how they feel, it's best to hear that person and try to do something differently instead of defending what you were trying to do. Because in the end, that's the way it landed and that's the way the person feels. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my question for the teachers from Edgerton, do you have that kind of training too, or that's just for other schools?
Well, I don't think, my name's Holly Gould. I don't think I've introduced myself as an Edgerton teacher. Obviously I am. I think it has to be part of the professional development. I was salivating almost, Stephanie, when I heard that that's what teachers in Janesville are doing, getting professional development on things that do come up every day. And Derek, as a board member, I know it's on the horizon. I wish there was anything I could do to get things moving a little faster so that it was a bit higher on the list of things that teachers could get, because we are ready. We need it for sure. Thank you, Adolfo. It's true. I don't think Derek knows what professional development we're about to get, but I know that he would be on board with it when it comes, right?
Absolutely. But to Adolfo's point, and I think what Stephanie said as well, is this, it's a mindset. So we have to focus more on understanding than being understood with these issues. The intent, it doesn't necessarily matter, but it's the way that it affects someone else. And so often we operate in our white bubble of, they didn't mean that we're not doing that in a bad way. And so there certainly is a lot of room for learning to occur. I know in Edgerton, they have this equity team now. I've heard of having diversity training. Mark Perry is supposed to be providing some of that training as well. It's excellent job, or at least getting people to start having the discussion. But then to move into action, you have to admit that something needs to be done before you do something. And I don't know that in Edgerton that we're quite there yet, but having these discussions, and as a parent, Adolfo, I encourage you to, if you don't get the response that you want from the teacher, go to the administrator, go to the superintendent's office. I mean, and I know you want the best for your child as much as I want the best for your child. And we have to have those uncomfortable conversations like we're having tonight. So thank you for bringing that up. And I hope that you continue to move forward. And I hope at some point we'll make it right.
Thank you, Derek. I don't know if other people have questions they want to ask, but I was thinking of Benelli for a second. Benelli, how many times were you told, oh, I'm sure that's not what they meant, or the next time they say that, then we will take action? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, to answer your question briefly, probably all my life. I've definitely heard that, but I do want to say that I've also been on the other side of that, right? And I am too learning. Just because I'm not a white person doesn't mean that I don't have to think about these things, right? I definitely need to think about this, engaging with other people of color, engaging with Black people, engaging with Indigenous people. So I've been on both sides, and I don't want to say that's necessarily a bad thing, because this is always a learning process. And as I said before, this is not a one and done deal. So yeah, I've heard that plenty, but I have also been on the other side.
Thank you. Catherine asks, and I think I can answer this. The equity team that Derek just referred to is teachers only. It's volunteer teachers at each of the buildings, but what a great idea for community members to be a part of it. And I really want to make sure people know that it's not just Beloit, Janesville, Edgerton. We're talking about Rock County, but wouldn't it be neat if it was a state mandate that everybody have a Stephanie on staff, or that every teacher be educated in equity, inclusion, and whiteness, 101, to know what our roles are. So Catherine, if they do involve community members, I'll be sure to call you up first.
I guess I'm wondering with the panelists, or I think, because I'm assuming that this has been an opportunity as community members to pull this back out of the classroom context for a moment, because it really is bigger than that. And teachers are front and center in this piece currently, but as community members, there are responsibilities as well. And I know this program was of particular interest to me when we were thinking about it, because when I started my position and did a lot of interviews with different stakeholders, the idea that adults across the community could be in who work in many spaces could be finding ways to be that adult. So I'm curious, outside of the school context, if any of the panelists have that experience supporting youth in a conversation like this, standing behind youth in a conversation like this. What are some other places in the community that this shows up? Because I know when we posed the conversation to youth, we did let it be as open as that perhaps they could be speaking about a healthcare space, they could be speaking about a business space, they're all the spaces they're in, how this shows up for them or doesn't. So I'd be interested in knowing about an experience outside of school.
I guess, being in this bubble that I'm in, my experiences outside of those realms is pretty limited. I have been dragged up to Madison to participate in marches and protests and had conversations with youth in those areas. And maybe from what I'm hearing, what I'm learning, that those are safer places, even though, as a parent, sometimes those things don't feel particularly safe because we're concerned about our children. But that's where I've found conversations and ability to talk to people and provide opportunities for my children to learn from other children of what is going on in the real world per se, and how to get information, get traction, and how to do real things to hopefully promote real change.
So Erin, this is Renee. To your point about outside of the education field, libraries in Wisconsin are currently doing some trainings and discussions on race. There is a program for which I am one of the facilitators, and it's called Wisconsin Libraries Talk About Race, and we are just getting started. I'm really excited about that. And then we also have inclusive services consultants across the state of Wisconsin who are working within their own libraries and their own systems to bring inclusion into their libraries across the board, from services, programs, the building, the administration, in a lot of different ways. And in a lot of these different things, we are also trying to engage the community. Diane earlier mentioned a Courageous Conversations program at the library. I think she was actually referring to our Human Library program, which we are looking at doing again this year, which gives people the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody who doesn't look like them, somebody who has a different life experience, and be able to have those transformative conversations. So in library world, that's some of what's going on.
Yeah, Erin, so I've been thinking about your question. I don't know if you specifically mean like adult to youth having these courageous conversations outside, or youth to youth, or adult to adult.
Yeah, I really think it could be anything. It could even be that you were, a witness to a, particular event, and there was something that occurred. I guess I'm just trying to pull it outside of the classroom context, because there's just a lot of opportunities for us as adults to be proactive in all the ways that the panelists have spoken about. There's a lot of different relationships and relationship capital that we hold or could hold as adults if we were proactive. And so I think I'm just trying to mine that a little bit deeper and see what experiences the panelists might have had.
Yeah, well, I guess I think one of the biggest things for me in my life, because I have two white parents, right, and their daughter is not white, um, gets back to me. It gets back to letting youth lead, and having the adults support. So I think if you do feel safe enough to or empowered to, I've brought up this kind of stuff at home, and not even like in a random way, but because it has some significance to me, right? Um, and so I think really you can have these conversations anywhere, like you're suggesting, right? Like outside of the school um, environment. So yeah, I would say like you could have these conversations over like lunch. I've done that, but again, that's really going to depend on like you as an individual, your social position, who you're talking to, like what I've extensively been talking about. Um, so I don't know if that really answers your question, but it might help like guide a little bit.
No, I think it's great. And the reason I always think about it is because I feel like I've been in a lot of spaces about courageous conversations or difficult conversations. And the example that's brought up a lot is, my 65-year-old uncle, right, at holiday time. And while I absolutely appreciate wanting to build relationships with all of your family members, it's hard not to see a missed opportunity if our focus is on a particular demographic of adults and not investing in youth who really, should receive the same opportunity or should get those spaces to be the kinds of leaders that we know they can be. So I guess I'm just thinking, back to the call to action steps, right? Of just like reflecting on where those opportunities might be and where those relationships could build, right? And what that looks like for everybody.
Yeah, so Benelli, in one of my interviews that I had done for this project, somebody wanted to be a leader, a radical leader. The adult wanted to be the radical leader. Has anyone ever asked you that question? Where do you want to go, Benelli? You're the youth. Put yourself as a youth person right now.
Right.
And has anyone asked, where do you want to go?
I don't know if they've directly asked that, but I've kind of felt like they're implying that. And I think that as youth, we have a lot of power, or we can have a lot of power, if we get support, if we can support each other. And I do understand like being a radical leader. I don't personally like identify with that necessarily, just because of the politics behind radicalism and whatever. That's a whole another conversation. But yeah, I think I've definitely gotten that question, and I've just said, like, I'm just trying to do what I can do where I'm at, and I'm trying to support other people in the same way.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Erin, you know that we are at 3 minutes,
I think we're
or we
coming
are
up to the absolutely to the end. Any final thoughts from panelists or participants? We have about 1 minute, and then we'll put up the upcoming programs, and that'll be the night. So if there's any final thoughts, you're welcome to unmute and share. Otherwise, we'll move on to closing.
Derek, I don't know if you're looking at the chat. I just wanted to make sure that you saw that Santo wanted to say thank you for being that kind of board member who's willing to be vulnerable think that's what Santo meant, and to be brave and come here tonight. We need more of you. Thank you so much.
I just want to thank everybody I thank you, Holly, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to be here, just to be present, and that to start by being present. And I encourage all the youth out there and the grown-ups. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable. Put yourself out there. You got to do this, because if not you, who's going to do it? If I'm not here, if I'm not doing this, who's going to do it? We've got to get up and we've got to do what's right for our kids and for our communities. So thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And I just want to also say thank you, because I see so many people out there virtually who have really helped grow our youth, do so much work and support. And I know COVID kind of interrupted some of the things that we do together, but just know that you are appreciated for all that you do and all the support you offer our youth.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You inspire me. I want to clone you.
So once again, lots of appreciations in the chat. I echo all of them, and special thank you to our three panelists, to Julie for moderating, and to Holly for being my partner in this program. For all of you here, our next steps, remember the recording of the program will be posted on the HPL YouTube channel. There's a special playlist for social justice programs, so it's easy to find. Always check the Diversity Action Team website, all of our partner Facebook pages for upcoming events and registrations. And we're always looking for more programming committee members if you have a special passion that you would like to share on these community programs. Our announcements are, we have 4 courageous conversations in the month of February, the danger of dehumanization. I can put that registration link in the chat, though I bet Amy will beat me to it by the time the slide goes down. We have renters' rights on Tuesday, March 8th at 6 p.m. at the Hedberg Library. Renee has more information on that she can put in the chat. Again, registration is required. The Diversity Action Program team for March is inside the Diversity of Asian America. This will also be a virtual program, and there is a registration link. And please save the date for April 21st, Stand Against Racism. The theme, we can't wait, equity and justice now. And with that, we let you go on with your evening. Have safe drive back to your couches, and hopefully we will see you soon.